If it's brown, lay down. If it's black, fight back. And if it's white, run away. You've probably heard the old wives' tale of what to do in a bear encounter, and you would probably be wrong. Listen to Creature Preacher. Play dead, get dead. That is the horrifying truth many times when it comes to bear encounters. Viewer discretion is advised for this next story. The story of Dr. Jacqueline Perry and her love, Mark Jordan, both 30 years old, from Ontario. They went into the backcountry, and they did not make it out unscathed. Their story went on to be retold in the Hollywood movie BACKCOUNTRY, which was a loose interpretation of the trauma that they suffered. Here is their story. Mark, I hope this video does not cross your path, but if it does, you did a phenomenal job. Everything that you could. I know that it hurts, but you are a brave man, and I salute you. Dr. Jacqueline Perry was 30 years old, and she was a beloved physician at the Sudbury Community Health Center in Canada. Her husband, Mark Jordan, also 30 years old, was a computer engineer and also a Boy Scout leader. He loved the outdoors, and he loved educating others. They had been outdoors for much of their marriage, and they had never had an issue until that fateful day. So when they packed up their SUV with all of their kit, they didn't even think to bring a weapon, not even a big knife. Nothing but a small Swiss Army knife that they would use around the camp for chores. As they loaded up their canoe for the trip, they weren't concerned. They had no reason to be. They had been into this provincial area before and never had an issue. They had seen much wildlife, but had never been so much as menaced by any of it. So they were completely at ease when they were setting their camp and making their supper that night. Mark had just finished setting the skillet when they heard a rustling in the brush behind them. They turned around, and they weren't extraordinarily scared when they saw the black bear approaching. It was large but gaunt, with its head down. What Mark didn't realize was this was no ordinary bear. It was a bear facing the starvation of a long winter without the necessary fat resources to get through. It was motivated by desperation, and it smelled that food and began to stalk in. Its head lowered was a clear indication of what was coming. Mark didn't know any better, and neither did Jacqueline, the doctor. They did what they thought was best, stood their ground, yelled at the bear, raised their arms, menaced the bear. But the bear never stopped. It went directly for Dr. Perry, grabbed her, and began to attack her savagely. Mark was shocked, but he loved his wife, and he threw himself onto the bear. He got it in a headlock, and began to choke the bear. With his free hand, he fished around for his Swiss Army knife, which he opened up with one hand, began to go to work. He stabbed the bear over and over again, and the bear turned its attention to him. When it grabbed a hold of him, it began to shake him violently. He fought back, stabbing the bear one more time in the neck before the bear let go. He didn't do very well. Even though he had stabbed the bear, he was far worse for wear. The bear's claws and teeth did far more damage, but it paled in comparison to what happened to his wife. She had collapsed on the ground in the fetal position. The bear had grabbed her by the neck and by the scalp and went to work, tearing and ripping with its claws. It was trying to eat her while she was alive, while he was fighting it off. He grabbed her and he put her in the canoe. He was losing blood rapidly. He had cut himself more with the knife than he did the bear, it seemed, and he was bleeding profusely. But his wife was bleeding out. He got her in the canoe and began to scream and cry for help. It was dark, the middle of night. They had been days into the backcountry, and suddenly he found himself needing help desperately. And now he did everything he could to keep his wife alive for that trip, desperately, as he screamed for help. And help came. A father and son vacationing from Pennsylvania heard him and took him quickly into their boat. They began to care for him and to triage the wounds, and they began to head farther up for the camp where they knew that they could find help. They soon saw another boat, and as luck would have it, it was a fellow adventurer from North Carolina, and he was a doctor. He quickly took them on board and took over her care. but it was desperate. Traveling in a boat is not like traveling in a car, and they were 10 miles from the ranger station. And sadly, Jacqueline Perry died of her grievous injuries along the trip. Mark was treated for his horrific injuries and later released, but he was never released from his guilt. Mark sometimes speaks about what happened to him and his beloved wife so long ago. He does so reluctantly, but he hopes that his story will help others. You see, they really did injury to his story when they did that movie. It was nothing like what really happened. Nothing at all. Unfortunately, Mark has said this more than 2 years later after the attack. He said, "I live every day with the guilt. You would think, as a man, with my arm around the bear's neck, that I simply could have slashed its throat and I could have saved my wife. But I thought fighting it and yelling at it would have scared it off. I didn't know any better." He was told to lay down and play dead if a bear attacked, and that is exactly what Dr. Jacqueline Perry did. She laid there on the ground and she played dead until the bear made it so. If it had not been for the bravery and the quick thinking of her husband, she would not have survived as long as she did. He was her only hope, and he did the very best that he could. It soon became a mission to find that bear, not so much to extract vengeance, but to find out what had happened. It was the first fatal black bear attack for years in Ontario, and they had to know why. They tracked the bear for some time, doggedly, and finally they caught up with the bear. It was a young but nearly full-size male, but in horrible condition, skin and bones. It would not have survived the winter to come. Although bears don't truly hibernate, they slow down their metabolism quite a lot. They have to have the fat to make it through the winter. The bear attacked them out of desperation, lured in by the food on their campfire, and then it saw them. And this is what I need you to hear, and hear clear from a zoologist who knows. Black bear encounters often are fatal. Right below the polar bear is a black bear at about 80% fatality rate when it comes to predatory bear attacks, which many times, if you're attacked by a black bear, it's a predatory attack. If you think that the bear is going to leave you alone, he might. Or he might just decide that that's exactly how he likes his food. Dead already.